Sometimes you just need a hammer, and what's in the market is only a toolbox with the hammer in it. Do you have to go buy the whole toolbox? You cannot afford this.
Hey, and welcome to this episode of Build versus Buy, a 30-minute conversation with product and engineering leaders about situations during their career where they've had to decide whether to build or buy. If you'd like to be a guest, reach out to me at Mang-Git@useanvil.com. That's Manggit@useanvil.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe on YouTube or leave us a rating/review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Enjoy this episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Build vs. Buy podcast. My name is Mang-Git, co-founder and CEO of Anvil, the fastest way to build software for paperwork. And today on the show, I have Sameh El Ansary. He is a co-founder and CTO of Treyd. It's spelled Treyd.io. And I'm sure he'd be happy to tell you a little bit more about Treyd and what they do. Thanks for being on the show, Sameh.
Thank you for hosting me today. First, even before we started, I really want to compliment this podcast. I was saying that it's the first time I binged the podcast because I was like, this is my everyday struggle, buy or build. And people talk like about all other kinds of problems, but this one is like someone feels the pain and wants to discuss it. So I couldn't be happier joining you and listening even more to you and to your guests. So thank you for creating this podcast.
No, thank you. And we're also excited to learn from you and hear your lessons that you've learned over the years exploring this question. So
Sure.
maybe to start, let's learn a little bit more about Treyd and your role and what does Treyd do at.
Yeah. Okay. Very quick background about myself. I have a PhD in computer science in distributed systems. I'm a little bit on the older average of or the end of the CTOs. And I did my PhD when peer-to-peer was the buzzword, where people wanted to grab not the AI PhDs, but they wanted to grab the distributed system PhDs who knew about peer-to-peer. Once I finished my PhD in Sweden, I started my first company, Hive Streaming, and it's now a world leader in corporate video streaming, live video streaming. This company went global and we took it rather big. There was like the build versus buy was no option because we had to do everything ourselves. And I did my second company, which was called RacePops. It was about AI in sports, like a skiing AI coach. And this company, I learned a lot in it. It didn't take off as the first one, but of course we had some build or buy decisions, but that was not the big issue. And this is my third startup, which is Treyd. And what we do is we do payables finance. So if you are this mug that you're drinking in or any physical thing, anything which is not SaaS, okay, that you buy has a vendor or a brand in Europe, or someone is buying it, either they're buying it or just trading it, and they get it from somewhere else in the world. It could be China, India, Vietnam, Italy, Portugal, Brazil, the US, whatever, but they're importing it. What we do is that we pay your cross-border counterpart, and it takes a long time until the stuff comes in with a ship to you in Europe, and then you have to sell and get the money a little bit later. So basically, our typical customer has 4 months where his money is completely locked. He just pays and just waits with no income. So we go and do this gap, and this is the number one bottleneck of growth. So we always say we wanted to make like hardware a scalable software. So all our customers are hardware vendors or brands, and they want to go fast. And this is the number one, and we solve it.
That's fascinating. I could see how if you paid out a large chunk of money for your goods and it's on a boat, you can't buy them until you've sold the shipment and made a profit. So there's always going to be this timing and cash flow issue that it sounds like
Exactly. Yeah. If you're going very slow on the business, you can just wait. But for fast growing companies and e-commerce companies, this is a big bottleneck.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's days at Flexport. We were actually thinking about doing this as well because Flexport before they would actually, they had was actually the goods on the ship. So
Flexport is a powerhouse of lots of many products. Actually, this brings me to our execution. We wanted this to be not for the kind of the very complex procurement department in a big company. You can have a brand, one of our brands, which was selling worldwide. It was like 3 guys and 2 girls in a garage, and everyone was handling everything. They were a startup as well. So we wanted to build something ultra simple. It has to be like, if you have an invoice from a Chinese supplier, you need just to upload it and click pay and it goes. It shouldn't be like applying for a loan and going with a suit to the bank to get a facility. It needed to be as simple as making a Facebook post. Like, so we were trying to, so like our ordering form has been designed like more than 120 times until we make sure all our customers are really do this in a very few clicks. That was the ambition. Do something like that, solve the trade gap, but with an execution where everything is rather simple. And actually, when we started in Sweden, Sweden has a very nice property for all its startup. There is no Swede who makes a company whose dreams is to sell only in Sweden. And that's why you see there are many successful companies from Sweden, because they always go global, right? So we do it once. Okay, now we learned how it works in Sweden. The problem of the buy and the build started once we wanted to go global. So we said we want to create a global company. And this is an aspect of buy and build I haven't seen a little bit before. For example, in my last company, I just want to get paid by credit card. I put Stripe. I get paid from everywhere. Buy. Slam dunk. Nothing else to discuss. Here, this is not that simple in our case. The dimension maybe that I wanted to add or felt eager to share with your listeners here is the idea of the effect of the J or going global on the buy versus build decision.
Yeah,
Right?
no. I mean, I think like
Yeah.
especially go global pretty early in your company's
Yeah.
life cycle. Maybe an American-based business could stay in America for 10 years before they expand globally.
Exactly. Exactly. Being in Sweden, you know that you go to the Nordics, then you go to the UK. Right now, we are in 6 geographies and expanding. But we believe we solved this by some magic here, or some just not magic, just lessons learned. I guess the first thing when we think about this buy or build, there is the common wisdom. If it's part of your core value, you are a company, you build some value, right? And then you capture this value. If it's in part of your core value, have full control on it, try to sharpen it, make it great, all the rest you buy. Yes, that is like what's written on the books and in the school books, basically. But when you go, it doesn't happen even without going global. I think it's a little bit like security. When you don't go, when you haven't been deep in security, you tend to say, "Am I secure or am I not?" You think about it very Boolean. It's either secure or insecure. Security is never Boolean. It's right, like you have to go you're
You
somewhere on
think
the
of it as
scale,
very black and white. Yeah, like,
right?
am I going to get hacked or not? But every layer in that stack, there's some vulnerabilities, and it's a spectrum. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the buy and the build is also like this. It's like like when you say, okay, fine, this is not part of my core. First of all, does someone build this or not? Sometimes it's not part of your core. It's something you need to do. You're gonna build it anyhow because you need to deliver. Fine, easy. Okay. The problem is when you hear there is someone doing this. Um, when you hear that someone is doing this, it's also not okay. Let's buy it then. Okay. First of all, for startups, there is a very like a never accepted answer, which is cost. But it's when you're a startup, sometimes the cost doesn't make sense because it has to do with the intersection between this product and what you need. So sometimes you just need a hammer, and what's in the market is only a toolbox. So with the hammer in it. So what do you go? Do you have to go buy the whole toolbox? You cannot afford this. Or sometimes in fintech, for example, things, and this is changing now, and I can see it all over the place. You buy something that is built for banks, like the business model is before that volume, if it was an API, before that volume, they are not even interested in you as a customer. Or it's designed for B2C and you want it for B2B, so you're high value, low volume, and they built it for low value, high volume, like things of that sort. So this idea of intersection cost is usually rather underappreciated, but it happens. But I want to discount it out because actually, that I guess everyone would see it for himself and do it. But although it is not that simple, sometimes cost is the thing. What can you do? Because the packages are buy it all or buy none. So you say, I'm going to buy none and just it's going to a couple of hours from my development. So that's the cost, but let's take it outside. In our case, we found a recurring pattern. So, for example, we wanted something, given that Anvil is also in signature, and that's another thing that I find very nice. We were doing, like in Sweden or in the Nordics in general, there's a very advanced form of identifying yourself electronically everyone basically has a cryptographic key, right? Issued by all the banks. It's called the bank ID. That you can verify your identity and sign. So that's very simple. Once you go to the UK and Ireland, or any other place that doesn't have that, it doesn't become as simple as that. You start going into other solutions, right? Okay, but then you start having this pattern. Okay, so in Sweden, I'm gonna do it like this. And maybe in Norway, I'm gonna do the equivalent. In Finland, I'm gonna do the equivalent. But in the UK, I'm gonna do something else. Then you wanna build your software, and your developer starts saying, if it's this customer, I'm gonna go through this flow. This customer, I'm gonna go that flow. And you can end up very quickly having everything double, right? So at this point in time, you say, should I buy or build? And in a way, we ended up being somewhere in the middle. I don't know if I should, because this part, I'm gonna mention this on two parts: the back end and the front end. Okay. So on the front end side, you get someone else's UI. You want to build something really slick, and you get some UI that pops up in the front of your customers, which is from another vendor. Yeah, and then it's different in different countries with different flows. They are like confused about the flows in different country. It becomes a mess. The quality becomes harder.
Control, right? You have control, especially on the front end. You lose the uniformity of the experience, the seamlessness of the experience. But I guess you're trading that off with letting somebody else handle the complexities of all of the decision trees in terms of,
Exactly.
what to present.
True, but when it's in one country, you're happy. You're happy with the handover. Once you have two handovers, then you're responsible for supporting the two different types of handovers. So even though the process itself became outsourced to someone else, the coordination of two outsourced processes, in our case, we have 6 outsourced processes. So we started choosing vendors, for example, in that case. So we went actually for e-signature and identity verification. We went somewhere in the middle. We went for the vendors that have an embedded version, which means they can give me almost all the engine, but they can give me an API, not like a JavaScript SDK. So in that sense, so I can build most of the front end in a uniform way. And that was a decision factor. So when we went out shopping, you said, okay, do you have an SDK or do you have an API that I can use? If you have if all what you can give me is JavaScript SDK, sorry, we'll not be able to do this. And that affected, of course, the design decision. But at the end, we started doing this, and in a way, we start building another API which hides the API underneath, and then we have a uniform like front end, and it started to work like this. Yeah, that was the like. This was and it kept recurring. It kept recurring. The same example was manifested, but sold also in a similar way in the backend. For example, when someone signs up, also there are two ways. You can basically torture your customer into filling all the bread and butter info that's already on his webpage, or just fill it for him. And we always actually wanted to do this kind of easy, simple, small, like very low number of clicks, very seamless experience. So we wanted to get the information. So you go get the information. The information is very clean and mature and organized in Sweden. For example, for even something like a very simple thing, like who has the right to sign on behalf of this company and take a loan? You have an API that gives you that. You go to the UK, you also have an API with a different format telling you different facts. And it doesn't tell you who have the right to sign, but it tells you who are the directors. But you have to check in the law, who are they? So you start trying to make something common between those two APIs. And then we end up actually having to create, again, a uniform data format, which is the Treyd format. Then we build a mapping from every data source to our common format. And then we have a uniform
This
format.
reminds me
Yes,
of a lot of the challenges we face at Anvil as well, which is, you know, a loan, let's say you're getting a car loan, but every single bank has a different form for that car loan. And so I always
yes,
joke that like every company has a standardized form, but it's just standardized to them. And so when you look
exactly.
across all of the companies, there's no standardization. And that sounds like they're running into, which is
True.
every country has their own set
Exactly.
of standardizations, but it's not uniform across the world. And therefore
Yes.
you're running into this problem where
No.
you might be missing pieces of information that
Yes.
you need for your trade kind of model,
Yes.
but maybe it's complete
Yeah.
for your in another yeah.
Yes. And that's why we started with the kind of illusion. It was like, okay, we have the data source. We're done. We just started. Okay. And sometimes you also have from the same vendor, you have two different formats. So the agencies that sell you the data, the same vendor for two countries will have two different JSON formats with something completely different. And sometimes it's a matter of coverage. For example, the open banking providers that are really good in covering the Nordics are not the same ones who cover the English speaking world. So sometimes you have to normalize within the same vendor across vendors. And then now at everything that we knew, we put it into three buckets. We say, is this the buy or the build or this third category that we started calling it, we have to be the aggregator of the aggregators. It was a naturally evolving pattern, right? There are aggregators, like there is someone who built a company that its sole purpose in life is to hide for you all the open banking APIs or open the accounting APIs or all the company data. But it's not enough. We have to take those aggregators, put them together, build a third layer of aggregator, which is ours. And that kept recurring and recurring. And at a point in time, we felt that we were almost creating 7 products that are exactly just aggregator of aggregators, nothing more. But they were essential for us to, when you solve the complexity a little bit lower in the stack, so you hide it and then the rest of the kind of the stack above it sees a uniform picture. So we actually bite the bullet on this a little bit in the part. And then, for example, Ireland, I think we integrated Ireland maybe fully. I think it just was like maybe 10 days and we're on. Because we started having a framework. In the beginning, we were rookies, like we didn't have this kind of plan. But then the pattern emerged. It's an emergent thing. And now we started architecting. So it's like buy, build, or actually the middle, which is like buy a little bit and put something on top.
It's funny because like I think a lot of times the sales pitch for buying versus building, right? Like the sales pitch for buying is buy us and we solve your problem for you. You don't have to worry about this problem anymore. But it really just moves the problem
Yeah,
to another part of your stack or another place or repositions the problem to something else, right? And so a big misconception oftentimes of buying a product versus building a product, right? Like I like to joke that there's a bunch of no code tools out there, but no code doesn't mean no work. You still had to put in work to build something out of the no code tool.
totally.
For this scenario, it's like just because you bought doesn't mean it's going to work perfectly for your use case. So the question really almost becomes um, adaptable is the product you bought to your use case, and how much coverage does it
100%.
provide that you no longer have to build, right? And like that's the trade-off. If it is highly flexible and covers 90% of the things you have to build, it's probably a pretty good buy case, right? You would want to buy that product and instead of having to build it completely from scratch.
Right. And even that exercise that you just said, just to understand the
Mhm.
flexibility, sometimes the amount of energy is even not less than building your own.
That's true. That's true. Especially if the document,
Right? It's,
right?
it's like, yes. There is another also dimension here. But I think it's a little bit classical. How does your tech stack yourself look like? If you're one of those guys who build like ultra, everything is a microservice, and you have a hell of a distributed systems in your back end, lots of schemas going, and lots of, for example, we are preferring structured monoliths from the beginning. we're using something like Django, which means we can spin apps like really fast. We ship really fast and we can test and get admin tools really fast and so on. If I was the same person doing this, I don't know, in some other stack where I have to build one of those language where I have to build everything myself from the ground up, of course, also my development cost would have been, and I guess also that again the geography. The person who has a tech team all in the US or all in Europe or has an outsourced team somewhere else in the world, like sometimes those are priced in a way that is actually, if I had a developer, it's going to be easier for some people. But and that's why I'm saying like the cost is not a thing, because it's always going to vary, so we can discount it outside. But like also your how agile is your tech stack, right? Because also a factor in what
That's
you do.
funny you mentioned geography. Something that we certainly come across quite frequently, where Anvil makes a lot of sense for a technology company based in Europe or based in the United States, where their development costs are European or United States or America based development costs. But as soon as we start talking to customers where their development costs are based in some maybe lower cost countries, Anvil presents our pricing. Sometimes they're like, I could go hire 2 developers for that. And so it's depending. I mean, it's almost like their way of moving fast is throwing more people at it. And sometimes that's a more cost effective way for them to do it. And therefore, they're never going to buy Anvil, because the value that Anvil provides at the price point that we sell it at. Right now, of course, you could argue that Anvil designed we designed our system better. We are much more flexible and scalable long term, but that's oftentimes a not in the decision making framework for these individuals who have
Right.
outsourced development in like lower cost countries.
True. It might also be whether they are buying it for their internal
Hmm.
tools or it's
Yeah.
customer facing, or like really the decision is not that. It's not. I wish the easy motto on the box if it's your core
Yeah.
value, right? It's not. It is a very. It's a. I think this is one of the secret sauce that makes just a guy who reviews budgets and looks at
Or I
looks
think
processes.
sometimes it's just like I want to
Yeah,
build everything, and that's not the right decision. Right. Yeah.
yeah, totally. It is wrong. Totally. If you're building also too much, you might be drowning your company
Yeah.
in technical debt. So the idea is that like we try to push it and put your energy where it matters mostly, but it's not that simple. Maybe another one, since we are in AI, it's related to geo expansion or going global, but it's also related to AI because when I say it, everybody almost doesn't believe me. Or yes, and then you probably don't know what you're talking about. I was like, okay, fine, impress me. I'm gonna say this also to you. Like the very darn simple problem of you look at an invoice and you say, who is the buyer? Who is the supplier? Who buys and who sells? The due date is when? What is the invoice of this ID? Right? There are companies who do this, even pre-Gen AI era. All the big tech have solutions for that. All the big three platform, Azure, Google, and AWS, they have APIs for actually either OCR, but here the problem is not OCR. It's almost like entity recognition that you want to understand what's inside. You want to understand the bank, like the Swift code, the IBAN, and so on, but in a reliable manner. And let me tell you that before Gen AI, we this is something that I definitely don't want to build. 100%. I don't want. And I need it for two things. I need it because we are solving a harder problem. The people who are funding SaaS companies, they get those very nice and structured data via API. I get my data through a very typo filled stuff from a small
It could be
factory
handwritten.
in China
It
or
could be
India.
handwritten in another language.
Yeah. Not to the extent of 100, but still it's a challenging thing. Full of typos, not structured. Maybe I don't know, photocopied like this on a like a little bit, not totally aligned, and yeah, pixelized a little bit, and so forth. And then I tried to go and find my and find tried all the big tech, tried a couple of vendors. All of this is top 75%. And I need this for my customers to reduce their data entry time. And I also need it for my compliance and need to check that everything is correct before we finance, right? And that actually gives a difference to our execution. If I built a company that needs a zillion people to actually sit in the back end, this is not a tech company anymore. We're at the bank again.
You're not
Of
that's
course,
pretending to be a tech company. Yeah.
exactly. So this was borderline. In your opinion, is this part of our core proposition or not? Should I buy it or build it?
Ooh. This should be something you build, honestly. I think if you did a good job at this, it's enough that I think it unlocks a lot of downstream capabilities, in a lot of ways. At the same time, you probably don't have a team of, you know, computer vision engineers or ML engineers that really understand this stuff really well. Um,
So it
yeah.
is tough, right? And it's as you're saying, and I thought I don't want to have this. I don't want to build this. I wanna actually buy it, because also the problem is not unique. Everyone in the world has this, right? So I shouldn't. That's what I started with, and I tried everything, and I was getting 75%, and it was no good. The 75 is equal to the 100, or to the zero. Sorry, because if something went wrong, I still need the human. So what I did is I actually let me tell you a small thing about myself. I always I was always an entrepreneur, but I was always teaching minimally at the university, whether in Sweden or whether in Nile University or American University in Cairo. My secret sauce was to go and spot rock stars in their last year of graduations and get this like the right material rather than the right experience. The rock star will ramp up quickly. I invest time in them and I work with them. So in that case, I actually got the machine vision engineer that you
Okay.
and we started working on it. And we went from 75s maybe to 85s because we trained our own data. Still, we were not feeling that this something is good. Then Gen AI came, and like I didn't think of Gen AI as something that has nothing to do with what I'm doing. This is vision. What? And then actually, I had a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, a friend of mine, and he told me he's working in the Silicon Valley. I told him, no, Sameh, just take the text out and throw it to the LLM and start asking questions. I told him, but it's not structured. I just throw the JSON, man. Just get the JSON out of the OCR API and throw it inside. And we started actually doing this, and we started getting way better. We went like in the 95s. We went like an order of magnitude, and without any knowledge, no machine vision, nothing, just a bit of prompt engineering. And then later, we started actually also fine tuning this. So instead of prompt engineering, we start showing things. This is something I am doing, I am building, I am maintaining. Just because I went in, I didn't find the vendor. I tried the vendor, it didn't work. I had to find something else. And luckily, there was a technology emerging at the time that helps me. And then we started actually doing other things. We started doing the compliance. So we're not, we have an ESG policy. We're not supposed to do things which have like big carbon emissions or weapons, or we shouldn't do it like we have an ethical code of what we can finance, right? But you still need to check what this invoice is. So actually, that's also something that the Gen AI helps us with. But if any vendor hears me and he believes he can give me an airtight solution to this, I'm gonna shut down my API and my connection to OpenAI, and I want to buy it. But I don't know. You just get thrown into this. You sometimes yeah. I can. So the aggregator of the aggregator became a very clear pattern for me, and I spot it now, and I know how to handle it, which is a middle ground. But something like this invoice AI is it's a screwball. I cannot make even a lesson learned out of it.
Yeah, it feels like you were you wasn't something that met kind of your needs, from a liability and accuracy standpoint. So you kind of had, not only did you build it, it was kind of in conjunction with the new technology that allowed you to build it even better, to come out with a productized version of this yet, right? Um, you're asking
Exactly.
for somebody to create it.
But you know how it hears from the
Yeah.
from outside. It's like, why are you building this? Why, shouldn't everyone
Yeah.
be building? I tried, guys. I really tried. Yeah, but sometimes you also get some screwballs. They're not very
Yeah.
logical, but you cannot know except by putting the time having the maturity to a proper machine learning kind of accuracy process before actually deciding what you're
Yeah,
going to do.
it's funny when I think this is in Silicon Valley companies, which is there's a saying it's like do things that don't. And so a lot of times companies will start
Yeah.
by in this scenario, let's call it the invoice stuff. They'll hire people to read it and then type it into the system. And the argument is that over time you will start chipping away at the inefficiencies to the point where technology will take over and actually solve this category or the set of problems for you, so you don't have to deal with it. Um, I feel like very, very few companies actually are able to completely extricate themselves from that situation, right? They're always somewhat stuck
Yes.
in that situation. Um, and fully, maybe they're able to hire 50 people instead of 100 people because their technology has improved the efficiency of those individuals, but it's almost never zero. Um,
Yeah.
it sounds like for you, you decided we're just not going to hire people to do this. We're going to actually find a technology solution to start, and having that orientation forced you to evaluate vendors and realize the vendors that existed don't meet your criteria. You needed it to be effectively, if not better, and
True.
build it yourself.
Uh, yes. Just a small confession. You are spot on, because the first time I built it, I had to hire like a mechanical Turk to input 4,000 invoices. But I will not hire a full-time guy to do this and keep paying for mechanical Turks. That's again, that would even shoot the premise of be me. And we are a fast-growing startup, so we have to solve it by some other me. But as you're saying, this is not a process that everyone can master and ramp up quickly.
It's like
Yeah.
it's hard to have to live through a lot of these experiences to understand where that decision is, and also have a sense for where you lie on the spectrum of building versus buying and what the trade-offs are. There's just too many variables at time here. Yeah.
Right.
Learned a lot from this conversation today. We talked about buying and what you bought. We talked about just being forced to build sometimes. So, global that I think I have a personal fascination with after having worked at Flexport. It's just such a big industry, and it feels like you're really solving some difficulties in that space. So that's really cool, and I'm glad we got to have this conversation. Before we wrap up here, though, we always like to ask questions, and the first one is
Okay.
one that's about a personal project that you're working on, or work project that you've been working on that you're excited about. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be software. It doesn't have to be
A personal project.
personal or professional, but whatever's interesting to you, kind of like really deep on right now.
Ah, yeah. Actually, the one thing I'm really fired up on now, before going to fintech, I had the time to afford to actually have personal projects and to teach, which was my, like some people play golf, but for me, teaching was just the ultimate hobby. Now, since I went to fintech, the time is very tough to get something outside of the domain. But one thing I've been trying to do off piste, like a little bit off track from the mainstream delivery, was actually something called a credit copilot. So the idea is we have seen our customers, when you are a CFO and you have lots of orders, supply and demand and things like this, and it's a little bit like playing Sudoku in a way. It's like you can do this, or playing cards. We have seen that people are struggling with this, and the big, like really pro CFOs, they mastered the art of playing this card game of sorts. We want to do something for our customers, for the not very sophisticated, again, the hardware startup who are manufacturing the new headphones or the new scooter, skateboard, or bike. These guys are not, when they're starting, they're not sophisticated. So I'm actually building something with a little bit, not this AI, the little bit more scheduling AI, like maybe this pre AI Winter 2.0 kind of technology. But this is like an optimization thing. You have a credit facility and you have orders and you want to play it right so that you actually get maximum value for your money. This is a very fascinating project, and I cannot wait to deliver it, but it
Yeah,
will have to take
that's
its
interesting
time.
because like there's a limit on the credit
Yeah.
facility, and depending on how you're placing
Yes.
orders and when those orders get paid out or the capital's returned,
Yes,
you can maximize that curve to get the best, or like
exactly.
have them show up on the right time. Yeah,
Yes. And I already built
yeah,
the tech to do it. I cannot buy this. I built the tech, but you understand that building something does not mean you have
right,
the product.
right.
Like from a good working product, AI prototype until you get the product, there are lots of steps. And this is the personal thing I'm excited about and I want to
Yeah, no,
finish.
it also feels like it's kind of like that mixes finances with just-in-time manufacturing principles. If you're doing a hardware like startup, right, to do orders for things in a way that both
Yes,
maximizes or minimizes the duration on which you have to
yes,
hold goods and maximize utilization of that credit facility, which is yeah,
yes. And also minimizes your
right,
funding costs. Uh, so it's definitely a multi-factor
yeah,
optimization problem. We've got the grip on the
okay,
technology, and we have something really cool. But it's like AI products are like this. Is like the always in AI, the core is very small, very high value, very low volume. But just to get into a product, everything around it. I think anyone who has built an AI system knows that the core is in terms of lines of code, is very small. Numbers of lines of code that is extremely hard to get right. But then you have all the web interface and the API and the databases and the data and yeah. To make it into a product, we're trying to steal some time from our roadmap to
nice.
do that.
That's really cool. And then our last question, which is share something, a product that you've recently purchased that you either loved or would never buy again.
We'll never buy again.
You could either you loved it or you would never buy
I don't
again.
know. I'm gonna mention something else. I'm gonna mention some products that I really love. If I was starting my company again, I would work with them just because they are in their phase of development. I'm in my phase of development. I didn't buy them. First and foremost, it's always we have this Swedish company called Encore who are doing a kind of PaaS platform that you just write your code and they create all the cloud for you. They have a very new, nice execution. So Encore is a product that I love. They were initially for Go and now they're for TypeScript. But it's like for someone who wants to build very lean development teams, I don't want to hire 17 platform guys just to serve two developers, right? These guys like really cut your development costs. Another one is actually that we bought and we're using is Northflank. It's a British company, and they're doing Northflank. They're doing a kind of Heroku, but within your own cluster, right? So if you have compliance, by the way, that deserve another episode, but will not compliance. Sometimes you can find a beautiful product, but you can't buy it. So I didn't buy Encore, but I wish, just because I work in Django and I'm waiting for their Python. Northflank we actually use. Formance is a French company which actually are the ones who like build the hammer instead of forcing you to get the full toolbox. They're built like a very generic ledger. This is a very beautiful company that I did not buy, but if had I started, I
Yeah,
already had other solutions. But I wish I could. This was there. In the US, there is Modern
yep.
Treasury.
That's funny. They're
It,
actually
they're
on the floor below our office space. We're in an industrious space. Modern Treasury is
it's a
yeah.
brilliant product. It's a brilliant product, but here again, it doesn't have European integrations, so I cannot buy them. So I actually I had to build my reconciliation engine because I cannot buy them. And then finally, Materialize, they do this real-time data warehouse. And instead of your number, your like you have your production database, right? The OLTP database, and you basically have a streaming or a batch pipeline to take out the data, put them into your data warehouse or lake house or whatever. But you want this to be refreshed in real time. So they are the most simple technology I've seen and brilliant. It's just for compliance. I need everything to be in one zone, and I have to send the data to their cluster. But other than that, I would have bought them. So there are lots of brilliant products out there that I wish I could have bought.
Sometimes the timing just doesn't line up, but it sounds like a handful of them you do use and you really love them. Again,
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
Wise, Modern Treasury,
Materialize, Modern Treasury,
Formance,
Formance, uh, Encore,
and
and
Northflank.
Northflank.
Awesome.
These are the ones on the top of my mind now.
Cool. Well, Sameh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for dialing in from Sweden. I know it's probably pretty late for you over there. And the days are probably now or starting to get pretty short over there. Uh,
On the way
but
down.
hopefully, hope brought you some joy and happiness and sunshine into your day when the sunshine is getting to. But really,
Yeah,
and thank you again for being a guest on our
likewise.
show.
Really.
Awesome.
And looking forward to always like I'm an avid kind of I'm like just waiting for more episodes to come.
On Spotify, of course, another Swedish company. Well, everybody, this was
Yeah.
Sameh. He is the founder, CTO of Treyd. That's again Treyd.io. If you have a chance, check them. It's a fascinating company, and look forward to releasing more episodes. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you found this show valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or here on YouTube. We'd love if you could leave us a rating and/or a review, as that helps others find this podcast. See you next time.